Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Today's question comes to us from the True Stories collection, as in, it actually happened at an event that I was actually judging. Amy plays a ponder and decides to keep the top 3 cards. She puts them back on top of her library and then says, "Go to draw." At this point, Nick cuts Amy's library. Amy calls for a judge. When you ask Nick about what happened, he admits that he wasn't paying close attention to Amy while she was resolving the ponder, and he couldn't clearly hear what she had said. He assumed that Amy had chosen to shuffle with the ponder and was presenting her deck for a cut. Given that you believe Nick's version of events, what is the appropriate infraction, penalty, and fix? Alright, so before I start talking about the answer, I want to go over a couple of things. First, I think that Nick's version of events is actually very credible. It turns out that it's very difficult to keep track of everything your opponent is doing, and especially if they're taking a long time to resolve their ponder, which a lot of players tend to do, it's very easy for someone to get distracted and not be paying attention to exactly what's going on. Also, anybody who's played Magic in pretty much any convention center can tell you that the acoustics are generally far from optimal, and so I would be prepared to believe that someone heard anybody say anything when they in fact said something else. So, given those two things together, I think that it definitely is believable what Nick said here. Also, I do think that Amy was in the right when she said, "Go to draw." It is true that because of how timing and priority works in Magic, it's not possible for any player to take any game actions in between when Amy decides to keep the 3 with her ponder and when she draws. However, I still think it's a good practice to get into to confirm this sort of thing with your opponent. Anytime you're about to take a game action that cannot easily be undone, I think it's a good idea to tell your opponent what you're about to do. That way, they know what's going on and are on the same page as you, and if there were some other effect that Amy was forgetting about, like for example a Leovold, then that would mean that Nick would have an opportunity to point that out before the game state got corrupted into something that would be really awkward to try to undo. So, with that being said, let's talk about what the correct infraction, penalty, and fix would be in this situation. In particular, the correct infraction is actually kind of an interesting case all by itself. My personal opinion is that the correct infraction for this situation is a game rule violation. However, there's probably some judges out there who are thinking that it should have been a hidden card error. To see why I don't like this, there's a couple of reasons that I want to talk about. First of all, on a philosophical grounds, the whole reason why hidden card error is a separate infraction from a game rule violation is because when you're dealing with situations where one player has extra information that the other player doesn't, it makes it really difficult to back up in a fair way. A lot of this philosophy behind hidden card error is built upon trying to mitigate the advantage of a player who has extra information and committing a mistake. We want that player to get the least chance possible to get a benefit from that mistake that they committed. However, if we look at the situation that we have right now, we don't have a match with that pattern. The person who committed the infraction was Nick, but the person who has the extra information is Amy. Because those are not the same person, then a lot of the reasoning for the differences in the penalties and the differences in the fixes between an HCE and a GRV doesn't really make a lot of sense. We don't have to worry about minimizing the potential for advantage that Nick has because Amy is the person who has the extra information. And so because of that, this infraction doesn't really fit philosophically with what hidden card error is trying to do. There's another reason why I don't like hidden card error here, and it has to do with a line in the text that defines what a hidden card error is. The root cause for this infraction is not Nick making a mistake with a game action that he was going to take. That would be what a hidden card error would do. However, what we actually have is Nick performing a game action that he is not supposed to take, and that leading to a situation that we cannot easily fix with information that's available to both players. In such a case, because the root cause is Nick doing a game instruction that he's not supposed to do, rather than Nick making a mistake with a game instruction that he is supposed to do that leads to this issue, that means that we are probably in a situation where I would say hidden card error doesn't really fit as well as game rule violation does. I'm making a big deal about this because it's actually very important. It's a common temptation for a lot of judges to try to decide what the infraction is based on the penalty in the fix that they want to give out. This is not a good practice for a couple of reasons. The reason that I always ask for the infraction, penalty, and fix in that order is because the infraction should determine what the penalty and the fix are, not the other way around. If you try to do it backwards, that's just an invitation for bias or other types of inaccuracies to creep into your rulings, rather than basing everything on the evidence and the facts that actually happened. Therefore, I definitely do not condone this practice, and I wanted to make it really clear that I had genuine, authentic philosophical reasons why I thought that game rule violation was the correct infraction to assess. In either case, the correct penalty is a warning. However, the fix is something else that's really interesting to talk about. So generally with a game rule violation like this, there's going to be two different policy accepted fixes that you could try to do. You could either leave the game state as it is, or you could do a backup to the point immediately before the error. Which one of these the judge decides to do should be based on their decision of which one gets us closer to what the game state would have looked like if there were no infraction committed. Of course, in this situation, that's a no-brainer. Obviously, if we could back up to the point immediately before the error, that would get us to exactly the game state that we're supposed to be in, and there would be minimal chances for someone to change their gameplay decisions based on information that they got at a time when they wouldn't have normally had access to it. So that's definitely what we would want to do. However, a lot of the time there's outside factors that constrain our decision. For example, it could be the case that the error was not caught until several game actions were taken, making it impractical to back up through all of them and improbable that someone wouldn't change their decisions somewhere along the way. That would be one reason why we would not want to do a backup. In this situation, it's not really clear how we would do a backup even if we wanted to do one. However, if you think outside the box a little bit, it turns out that it is possible. Remember that Amy just got done playing a ponder. That means that she knows what the top 3 cards of her library should be and in what order they are. If we can take that information from Amy and combine it with the fact that we know approximately where in Amy's library the cut would have happened, then that means that we probably should be able to take Amy's deck away from the table, go through it, and if we can find 3 cards that match Amy's description in a spot that's approximately where we expect the cut to have been, then that means we can just cut the deck right there and undo the mistake. Simple as that. Well, I say that as though there's no downsides to this solution. However, I definitely don't want anybody to think that that's the case either. One thing that I imagine probably a lot of people have on their minds right now is what would stop Amy from just saying whatever 3 cards she really wants, and whether or not that's the 3 cards that she kept with Ponder. If we're able to find 3 cards that match that description, then we just improved Amy's Ponder for her. And that is a potential concern. However, I'm not really bothered by this for a couple of reasons. First of all, the probability that Amy could name 3 cards in a row that all matched and were in the approximate right spot of the deck is relatively low. The only real way that someone would be able to know for sure that there were 3 cards with specific names in that order would be if they got to look at the deck and put them in that order. So that's the first thing, is that it's certainly not a guarantee that Amy is going to have those 3 cards in her deck if she just makes something up. And if I can't find 3 cards that match Amy's description, then I'm probably going to have to go back to shuffling the deck and resolving the ponder again, or else we're going to have a conversation with Amy about why it's important not to lie to a judge. Remember that Amy previously chose to keep these 3 cards on top of her deck when she would have been able to shuffle. So that means that it's at least 3 cards that Amy thinks are above average. And that means that I don't think the risk versus reward for doing an opportunistic cheat like this is really going to be there. Another thing to consider is that lying takes a lot of extra mental energy. If Amy wasn't already planning on coming up with something like this ahead of time, then she would have to, on the spot, evaluate what 3 cards she would put on her dream list for a ponder, and that would be kind of difficult to do in a way that wasn't obvious to a judge that you were trying to do something shady, especially for a judge that has a lot of experience with doing investigations. So taking all that together, I think that this is a pretty good situation, and I don't think the possibility that Amy might take this opportunity to cheat is a really big concern. As it happened, in the actual game, both of the players were really happy with this fix. Amy was not able to name 3 cards exactly, but she was able to give 2 cards exactly and 1 description that was close enough that I was pretty confident that I would be able to find the correct spot in the deck. I was able to find those cards in a spot that matched roughly where Nick said that he had cut, and so I felt pretty good about undoing the cut there. Both of the players were really happy that something that they thought would be a really thorny rules question happened to have such an easy and simple fix that got us right back to the game state immediately before the error, just like what we had hoped to do. But that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.